Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I watched Ezra Klein on the Majority Report. He did a little debate with Sam. Apparently Ezra had been trying to get onto the Majority Report, and it just now happened, which is good because the Majority Report, Sam, and a lot of people on the left have been critiquing Ezra Klein. He and another author put out a book called Abundance, which essentially is, you know, a potential strategy for the Democratic Party to take going forward. And there's a sense of the party needing to go in some new direction. And so there's different factions of what trying to seize that opportunity looks like. Ezra Klein essentially is further articulating what seemed to be the strategy of Kamala Harris's campaign, which was to, you know, slash regulations on building to make it easier to build so that more building happens for housing, whether it's private or public, and that will lead to housing prices going down and affecting the overall job market, etc., in a positive way. And there is reason to think that, like, zoning laws and the types of regulations that Ezra Klein is talking about are a big part of what holds back construction in a place like LA or New York, and makes, you know, contributes to housing being a problem. However, Sam and Ezra just seem to have a difference in belief in, like, what the proper way to look at the balance of power is in this situation and how it affects the outcomes of these various more granular policy disputes and zoning disputes and that sort of thing. So this can be a little tough to follow because of that, because they're talking about very specific granular things. That's part of Ezra's whole thing, is you have to look at the really deep, detailed examples of how these policies are shaking out. And that's where you see that it's not all about moneyed interests. It's not all about the fact that the fat cats want to stop building because, you know, of this reason or that reason, but that there are complex interests at play. And I think that at least is a compelling argument. But let me play a couple clips real quick of them talking and then go from there.
You don't address moneyed interest per se in the book. The primary problem is, I mean, if you just do a summary of the book, primary problem has to do more with the regulation and the handcuffing the state has done of itself. But the state doesn't do it itself. Like, all of this handcuffing comes from a place, and it's either moneyed interests or it's not. And so I have no doubt that at different times.
This is where I think you've really oversimplified politics. I want to try to find the right example, because I think if we stay high, we just are like yelling about this abstract question of money. But let's talk. We both believe in decarbonization.
I think that's really grounded, though.
Hold on, but let's talk about it from this perspective. We both believe in decarbonization, right? Climate change is a problem.
Yes.
And we sort of see the pathway on that is we have to build a lot of green energy to reorient our economy so you can run a modern economy on a green energy basis. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So to do that, you have to move all this energy production over to renewable sources, and then you have to get the energy from where it currently is, right? A solar farm, a wind farm, a hydroelectric, project, whatever it is, and run it through transmission lines to where we plug shit into the wall and charge it. I have done a lot of coverage of this failure point because we are, to be perfectly clear about this, failing to build enough transmission lines. There is no world in which our decarbonization strategy works if we cannot increase by orders of magnitude how fast we are building transmission lines. There is money trying to build transmission lines. There is money trying to slow down the building of transmission lines. Just walking into this process and saying, where's the money, doesn't get you anywhere. Like, I have talked to the private equity figures trying to get a transmission line built. I have also talked to the green, New Dealers trying to get that same transmission line built. And I've also seen the people standing in the way of it who have all their reasonable and good arguments. If you follow or report on any part of the decarbonization fight, you will find that the entire architecture of environmental policy we have is being mobilized against it in order to sue it out of existence, sometimes by moneyed interests. But there was a point in time when like a chapter of the Sunrise Movement, I think it was in Mass, signed on to a solar moratorium. There is a lot of conflict among people who see themselves as liberals committed to these goals, etc., on whether building is good or bad. I think that if you're looking very skeptically, but what do you think NIMBYs are?
Well, I think NIMBYs, for the most part, are wealthy people.
Great. That's a big part of the fight we thought we were about to have.
The Kennedys,
yes,
stop the windmills.
So now you're making my argument for me. Come on, do it. Give it to me here.
No. But when I look at the common strain through those people and their ability to actually impact policy, I see money.
Okay, but so you look at one strain, and I probably have a broader set. So let me give you one.
What's broader than that?
Let me give you one where we will disagree.
Wait, what is broader than that? Because
it's not just the Kennedys. It's not just the people you're comfortable with.
I know it's not just the Kennedys, but I'm talking wherever those NIMBYs succeed, I am willing to bet that the relationship between how much money they have and the YIMBYs have, the NIMBYs far more often than not will have more money.
This was a pretty long-spanning debate, and it was pretty interesting for the most part. They definitely get real in the weeds. Sam likes to get in the weeds, and Ezra is apparently taking that approach as well. And honestly, I think in that sense, Ezra outperformed him a little bit on this one. This abundance thing is his prerogative, so he has specific examples in mind. And Sam had some examples of what he was talking about, but I think overall, Ezra was able to communicate his worldview pretty clearly. So I thought his performance was good, and Sam did a decent job critiquing it. But what I would say that he kind of missed a step on a little bit is going a step further on his critique about power dynamics. He essentially says that he doesn't think Ezra Klein takes power dynamics and the power dynamics of wealth inequality into consideration when taking these like specific zoning disputes and extrapolating them to a larger worldview about regulations being a major thing that the Democratic Party needs to focus on getting rid of. Ezra Klein says he doesn't think that's a fair dispute, and that he believes the entire concept of abundance is about power, and it's about how the power in these more local areas is distributed. And his claim is that on an individual level, on a union level, on a corporate level, people use the system that has been put in place by liberal governments to halt construction, sue companies that are trying to make public housing, private housing, and that essentially an infrastructure of regulations and procedures has been created that stops zoning across the country, and especially in like densely populated and liberal governed areas. And so, he's saying that there's all kinds of different groups of people that use these levers of power in a way that ultimately disincentivizes people from building. And Sam, I think, correctly points out that he's not taking into account enough that the ones who are going to be more so in control of that decision making and how those levers of power get used, he doesn't quite take into account enough how that dictates the outcome of these situations. So I think Ezra Klein gets it right that on the short term, if you're trying to get building going, and if you're trying to stimulate that part of the economy, again, public housing and private housing, then yes, slashing regulations like that, getting rid of some of these regulatory infrastructures in the short term might lead to more construction. But it also, if you don't account for the fact that people with more money are more often the ones who are able to leverage this system in their favor, they're more often the ones who are able to leverage any system in their favor, because our system is designed to let them do that. So it doesn't matter if liberal governments or more Republican governments on a local level are the ones who are setting up these infrastructures. Ultimately, the rich are going to be able to use their wealth to have more influence. And so on the aggregate, when in the outcome of that policy move on a broader level, because Ezra Klein is not just arguing for like targeted deregulation in, on a local level to stimulate building in some places. He wants this to be a broader focus of the Democratic Party, and basically sees the fact that liberal cities are not building enough as one of the major things that's holding back America as a whole, not just the Democratic Party. So he could very well be right about that. However, if you get rid of the regulatory infrastructures that are put there so that the wealthy cannot take advantage of and monopolize the real estate of any given city, then guess what? They're going to come in and they're going to do just that. And so you might stimulate building in the short term, but you're essentially just going to create more communities that are exploited, and there's going to be more inflation because you're going to be creating the incentive for people to profiteer off of rent even more. You're not addressing the core problem of people using property for profit and trying to stimulate that incentive, which is essentially what Ezra Klein is advocating for. He's saying that you should be allowed to build if it's going to profit you, is only going to lead to a more bloated housing crisis situation that does not address any of the issues that have put us in a crisis in the first place. In other words, yes, some new building should be done and there should be more affordable housing, but there's also places that people could be in right now. And one of the other things that he points out there is that he's surprised that it's people like Sam that are his critics on this abundance stuff, because he thought the intra-party fight was going to be more between degrowthers and people who want to build. Degrowthers being people who have identified that the economy as we manage it, geared towards constant growth, is unsustainable. And so it needs to be brought to a place that is more sustainable, so that the maximum amount of people can benefit from it. In other words, transitioning to a society that is not based on infinite capital growth, but something that's more stable than that. So it's a certain argument. It demands radical change of everything about the way we do things in society. And so as much of even a practical argument as you could make for it, it's very difficult to articulate a strategy for how to do that on a nationwide local level, let alone globally, which is really how something like that would have to be applied. So in other words, Ezra's strategy is more practical within the context of society as we know it. But I think even Ezra knows that this strategy is not sufficient to reversing the course of climate collapse. You know what I mean? We are well on our way to that. And I guess I would fall in the camp of saying that more building projects is not necessarily the priority. But he is pointing out that is, in his mind, the fundamental dispute here. People who think building more is a solution to the housing crisis and other problems, or whether it's not. And he's right that the way this stuff plays out on a local level is different on a case-to-case basis, and there are different forms of power that people can leverage and use this system for. And so maybe there is cause for some deregulation, but ultimately, if you don't address the fact that the people who are able to hoard more wealth, like in the example that he used there, that there are firms that want to build affordable energy and there are firms that want to stop those affordable energy projects, and both of them have money. And it's like, well, yeah, but the ones who have more money are the ones that don't want to move away from fossil fuels. That's the whole point. The reason that our society ends up revolving around that form of business as much as it does is because that is where most of the hoarded wealth is, a large percentage of it. So ultimately, on the aggregate, those are the people who exercise more control over all of the levers of power in government. And so until we address that problem as a fundamental priority, cutting regulations so that more building can happen is just going to lead to a worse technocratic and oligarchic situation, which is hard to imagine based on what we're seeing now, to be fair. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting different kinds of stuff there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main channel, book reviews, movie reviews, also music. If you like the music that plays in the back of these podcasts, all that's going to be posted there, as well as my EPs. I just dropped a new EP called Dead Internet Theory, which is now available on all platforms, but it was available first for members only. So if you want early access to future music and projects like that, become a member. And if there's other stuff that you would like to see as members only content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.